He discovered a relationship between numbers that is fixed and nothing can be done to change it. But it's the discovery piece that happened. Last week, I was talking about Nelson's life, and I was talking about his crisis he went through to discover this concept. He didn't discover something new. He discovered something that was fixed and was already there. He just discovered a new way to look at it and to use it. Welcome to the Bankless by Design podcast, where we rethink money, ditch the system, and rediscover what it means to truly thrive well. I'm Tricia Miller, mom of 7, financial coach, and founder of ThriveWell. Around here, we believe wealth is more than numbers. It's about freedom, stewardship, and building a legacy that lasts. If you're ready to challenge the norm and take back control of your financial life, you're in the right place. Hello and welcome to the Bankless by Design podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the importance of imagination, and we're going to be going over this section of Nelson Nash's book in the Becoming Your Own Banker series. Now, before you switch this off and think, imagination, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for numbers. Trust me on this. You don't want to miss this one. But before we get started, Jonathan, welcome. And how are you doing today? I know you've been through it a little bit.
I'm doing well. Came down with the flu or something on Sunday, and it's now Wednesday that we're recording this. So feeling much better today. I just was bedridden for a little bit and coming out on the other side. Miller's Bricks did just hit 10,000 followers like yesterday though. So that made me feel much better. So yeah, but in general, I'm feeling much better today. How are you?
Glad you're feeling better. I know the holidays are great, but oftentimes illness seems to hit a lot of people during that time as well. Well, I also had something I wanted to share with you, though. I have had a wonderful experience over the holidays. I have had a habit of reading to my grandchildren ever since they went to Germany, the twin grandchildren that I have, a couple of 8-year-olds over there. And I have an older granddaughter, almost 10, that is here not far from me, and we all get on FaceTime, and we have been reading the Chronicles of Narnia series together. Well, normally we just read like once on a weekend, but because it's the holidays, parents are working. They love it when they get a little hour break with Gigi's reading hour. So we would get on there and we were reading every single morning for most of this holiday time. And it has been so incredibly fun. And as I've been reading with them, I've been struck by C.S. Lewis. We just finished The Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
Okay.
Did I ever read that to you?
Yeah, I read through the full books.
Okay.
I think you read them as a family when we were younger. But
yes. But I actually don't think I actually read this far. I think we just read a couple of the first ones together.
I know we definitely read the first 3.
And then I think the kids maybe continued on the series on your own. But this is the first time I've read through the 5th book.
Okay.
And I was struck by it because C.S. Lewis is so imaginative. And this particular one was just full of creativity. And one of the favorite things was the kids getting introduced to the Dufflepuds. Do you remember the Dufflepuds?
I don't off the top of my head, actually. I don't.
The Dufflepuds were they found them on the voiceless island of the voices. That's what it was called. And at first they were invisible, but they were considered uglified until Lucy broke the spell and they got to become visible again. But when they were visible, they had one foot that was like a big, long, almost like a snowboard. And they would lay on their backs and put their foot over top of them as shelter and sleep under their foot. Anyways, the kids thought this was great fun. And quite frankly, I was having a blast with them as well. And just thinking to myself, how is this 52-year-old man? Now, granted, he's an Oxford professor. You think of him as very stuffy and stoic, and yet it is hilarious. And I'm just thinking, I have not exercised my imagination like this in a long time. So some of the stuff that's been going on with me as we're now looking at this chapter on imagination, I couldn't help but be struck by that correlation, let's just say. So we want to start on page 14. And if you want to go ahead and start reading it, I think we'll just kind of read through this story. It's a very short page, so it's not a lot. And we'll just kind of talk about it as we go along.
Awesome. Do you want me to stop at any particular point? Or you just want to read through the whole thing?
I'll stop you if we need to.
Sounds good. All right. Page 14, imagination. Starts with a quote from Albert Einstein. Imagination is more important than knowledge. The infinite banking concept is an exercise in imagination, reason, logic, and prophecy. So to start out, let's begin with the part about imagination. To help stimulate your imagination, let's go back in time to the late 1700s. The German schoolmaster was having trouble with his boys that day, and they were rowdy 7-year-olds. He wanted to quiet them down and to punish them, so he gave them a problem. Add up all the numbers 1 through 100. The boys got their slates down and started to work on the problem, and his plan seemed to be working, except for one boy who just sat there staring out the window. Presently, he picked up his slate, wrote down a number, and turned it in to the schoolmaster. Since his was the only correct answer, the schoolmaster took note of the fact and asked the boy how he did it. The boy said, I visualized a line with the figure 1 on the left side and the figure 100 on the right side. Then I cut the line at the halfway point, 50, and folded the scale to the left so that there were now 2 lines that were parallel. 100 was lined up with 1 on the left side, and 50 and 51 were lined up on the right side. Adding the 2 numbers on each end of the scales was easy to do. I noticed that all the pairs of numbers in between on the scale added up to 101 too, and that there were 50 pairs of the sets of 101. Multiplying 101 times 50 is simple. The total was 5,050. Thereafter, the young boy received special tutoring, and he later became one of the 3 greatest mathematicians of all time. His name was Carl Gauss. Young Gauss did not invent that fact. He discovered what God had done already. He discovered a relationship between numbers that is fixed and nothing can be done to change it.
Let's stop there for a second. All right. So we get what's happening here. This is like just such a typical situation, right? You've got a schoolmaster, a teacher. I guess that's what we called them back in the 1700s, who's got these rowdy 7-year-olds, and he's over it. And he needs them to be busy about the task and taking some time. And what happens? All of them, it seems to be working. He's got them all very busy trying to solve this problem, adding up all the numbers 1 through 100. I'm sure he was hoping this would take at least half an hour. But what happens?
One boy figures it out.
One boy figures it out simply by staring out of the window. And it tells you how he did it, visualizing a line. Here's this imagination piece that I think Nelson wants to see. And he's using even a mathematical example. Because when we come to a book about finance, I think we automatically assume that we're just going to do the math, that all of the conversation is going to be about the math. Very practical, personal finance. Where's your budget? What's your line items? How are you going to save enough money to retire? This is how we typically talk about personal finance, not Nelson. And I think sometimes that is the reason this book throws a lot of people. I know it did me. I remember reading this and just going, what for? Why is this here? And I will say, even last week, I was tempted to say, maybe this little page, maybe this one we could just skip. And then I was thinking this through and I'm like, nope, no way. Nelson is very intentional with everything he wrote in this book. And the longer I considered this, the more I was exercising my own imagination and seeing the validity to imaginary stories and everything else in my week. It's funny how this kind of works. The more I realized, no, he was setting us up here to wave a flag and say, hey, I'm giving you a clue here. This is going to be a little different going forward in the book. The very next story is going to be the grocery store. And it's going to be very important, but you might be looking at me like, why are we talking about a grocery store? Why are we talking about cans of peas on the shelf? Why are we talking about buckets of water at sea level? Why are we talking about
adding 1 to 100?
Right. Why are we talking about adding 1 to 100? It doesn't have anything to do with my personal finances or whole life insurance or like what gives, right? And so I thought, no, we need to touch on this because this is actually super important. And then I have to confess, I'm going to tell on you here for a second, but only because you are so much like me. I heard it when you talked to me earlier this week and you said, I hate being sick. I feel so unproductive. I'm stuck in this bed. Well, there are personality types like ours that just want to go, 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 want to be productive, want to be efficient, want to get it all done. You know, we have goals, by the way. We have to-do lists. If you're any personality like that at all, then taking time, for goodness sakes, daydream, use an imagination, you know, take a walk through nature, anything like that, just it feels like a complete waste of time. And yet there's more and more research coming out that Nelson was right, that imagination is super important for us. And so here he's showing us that this kid, obviously famous Carl Gauss now, but at one point, a 7-year-old boy sitting in a classroom, staring out the window, manages to actually be far more productive and efficient with coming up with the answer, much to the chagrin of the teacher, than the rest of the boys who are penciling it out, trying so hard to be mathematically motivated or, you know, as we would normally think. So,
well, to jump
on that.
Yeah, to jump in there, I would say that that's exactly how I took this. Like as soon as the first time and even the second time I start reading through this, funnily enough, my brain instantly goes to, oh yeah, isn't this exponents or something? Like, don't I just put 10 to the 10 or something? Like that's where my brain starts going is, okay, what's the practical algebraic way to solve this, you know? And I'm probably still wrong, to be honest. And it's been a while since I've done basic algebra, you know, but yeah, I just thought that was really interesting because for me, that's exactly how I started to do it. It was like, oh, well, you know, math. And then for him to start talking about like, oh, I pictured 2 lines and one was, you know, from 1 to 100. Then I split it in half. Like my brain, I didn't even go there, you know, and it's just like, right. It still struggles for me to even wrap my head around it when I first read through it. And then only when to the part that we'll get to in a little bit, does it kind of start to really make sense for me. But even then, made me have to take a step back where it's like, wow, like perspective is everything. You know, it's just so funny how different people can approach different problems and come up with a completely different solution, potentially come up with the same answer, maybe, but a different way to get there. You know, and I think that's something that's really interesting too, because even I can think back to high school or middle school where, oh, hey, show your work and how you got to that answer. And if you're the way you got to the answer isn't the right way that we wanted you to get to that answer, it's not right, which doesn't make any sense. But that's very common where it's like, oh, you didn't do it the right way. Like, you know, your method wasn't right.
I think in some ways our school system actually discourages imagination.
Exactly.
And I mean, it might be a little bit better that they at least ask you to show your work and how you got there. But for the most part, when we were in school, isn't it mostly memorizing facts, regurgitating just the facts, please? And so the person who can memorize, you know, I was a straight A student. I was really good at memorizing. My creativity is not so great.
Exactly. It's very black and white and doesn't leave any room for gray, which the world is very gray.
There's so much here. I was just doing a little bit of research prior to this conversation and looking at why do psychologists even say we need imagination. And I got out of an article in Psychology Today. It gives you a complex cognitive process to create mental images, and it encourages creative thinking and problem solving. It gives you out of the box thinking, discovery. And isn't this all what Nelson has accomplished with this infinite banking concept? He was on a mission of discovery. So he is very much out of the box thinking here. And Nelson did say he spent a lot of time. He mentions, I'm sure as a forester, he was probably spent a lot of time walking through the woods, but he also spent a lot of time as a pilot. And he said that being a pilot basically was like hours and hours of boredom, just punctuated by 30 seconds of stark terror on either end, takeoff and landing. So in the meanwhile, he had a lot of alone time up in the clouds, overlooking the world, I'm sure, as he's flying. Can you imagine? And just having that time to make connections. And I think, so again, as your mama, just speaking to you, and the things that I have learned in my own life is that if there's any fault that I have that I really need to work on personally, it's to get out in nature more. It is to slow down a little bit more. It's to take the time to allow your mind, your heart, your soul to make connections, to be creative. That takes some time to actually rest and relax.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because, again, with our weeks correlating to this episode was you said that to me when I started coming down sick, was like, Johnny, clearly you need to start setting aside more time to do the things that I like to do, my creative outlets, whether that's, my photography or being out fishing, and like your point of being back out in nature. Like I have just been go, go, go all fall and all winter pretty much. And, Trish and I were good about getting out in nature in the summer, and that has kind of subsided a little bit with the weather and things like that, of course. But yeah, it's just really funny that you bring that up because that was exactly what you said to me when I got sick was, part of that rest and that even just, you also mentioned it kind of helping clear your thinking and allowing you to kind of come at things anew. It's good to take those breaks, even when they don't feel like it. You were like, hey, you might need to have to put it on your to-do list.
That's right.
But to go and have these outlets and to have these other things where, to your point, where our mind is allowed to kind of ponder and to imagine. And that's something that you and I have talked about in other aspects of our lives and things. And that really most, especially modern Americans, don't have time to sit and ponder. Like I brought up an example to you, I think a while ago when I was just kind of in one of these philosophical conversations we were having where I was like, can you imagine what it would be like? I went to the Natural Bridge with Trish, right? I don't know if you've ever been there in Virginia. It was discovered by Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, I think. It talked about how, I think it was one of those two. And gosh, correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody correct me. But it was one of the founding fathers found the Natural Bridge in Virginia. And it talks about how it was really just from like a walk through the woods on their property. And I was just kind of thinking about when I was standing there, what it would be like to be out in the woods, pre-roads, all these things, and to be in such a quiet place to just kind of sit and be with your thoughts. Like in the modern day where we're just so go, 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 like none of us really have time to sit and think. So for his point, when he's a forester, when he's an airline pilot, he has time to sit and think about these things, and the importance of imagination becomes far clearer. And sorry for going on a bit of a ramble there, but my point is that I don't think we understand the importance of imagination and pondering because we just don't have the time to do it right now. And if we did, I think we would just think about things a lot different and a lot deeper.
Yeah, it's true. I've had a lot of things going on business-wise, getting ready for a vacation, a trip and everything. And yet I made it a priority to spend that hour every single day with my grandkids reading this story. And I thought that has ended up being the very best hour of my day. I mean, it has been so rewarding, and it has shown me the importance of taking that escape for an hour. And not only is it building relationships with my grandchildren, but we're going on an adventure together. We're using our imaginations. And I got to say this just because for me as a grandmother, this is a huge win when I tell them that I'm going away and we won't be able to read for a week. And my 9, almost 10-year-old granddaughter says, "That's okay, Gigi. I'll read to them." I was like, oh yes, they've caught the reading bug. These kids who are, they're normal kids. They're playing with their Legos. They're on their iPads and all of this stuff, all the modern everything, but they're finding incredible joy in this story. They can't wait for reading hour with Gigi. It is the absolute best, most rewarding thing I think I've ever done. To get back to imagination. Part of me that it really struck me was that here is C.S. Lewis with such an incredible imagination. I'm like, I would have never thought of all of the different islands that we went on. Characters, the way he just made these descriptions. But now this was written how many years ago? 75 years ago. Life was slower. My daughter also mentioned he was a professor. He probably had lots more time on his hands. I can kind of picture him sitting by the fire, smoking a pipe and, reading his Norse mythologies. And so some of that comes through. His descriptions are a lot of, I think, Northern Ireland. So out in nature, like just the time. And we've lost so much of that. So as much as I was just struck by my lack of imagination in comparison.
And it's one of those things that honestly, if you don't work it, it's like a muscle. Mm-hmm. It goes away. and it becomes harder to start using your imagination again. And it's to your point, I need to get back into reading sometimes it's not a bad thing to read a fiction book, something to stimulate the brain, to give you to where you're developing this image in your mind. And,
I'm a book lover anyways. And I did see this quote. I wanted to share if I could find it now. I don't know. I may have lost it. Here it is. Actually, this is from Henry Ward Beecher. And I thought this is so good. A little library growing every year is an honorable part of a man's history. It's a man's duty to have books. A library is not a luxury, but one of the necessities of life. Be certain that your house is adequately and properly furnished with books rather than with furniture. Both if you can, but books at any rate. I thought that was so good. All right. A little bit of encouragement there. Quite a bit of rabbit trail here, but that's okay.
It's okay. It'll all make sense when we
That's
wrap
right.
it up.
Okay. So let's go ahead and finish the last part of this.
Okay. So now that we understand this fact, we can take a shortcut in getting to the answer. Whenever we are adding anything beginning with 1 and ending with a multiple such as 10, 100, 1000, etc., you simply pick the midpoint in the first case cited above that was 50, so 1 through 100, and simply put that same figure alongside it. So 50-50, right? So 1 to 100 added up was 5,050. It's 50 beside another 50. So to add all the numbers 1 through 1,000, you simply pick the midpoint again, 500, and put 500 alongside it, 500,500. Simple and accurate. It is fixed. Try to pass some law to change that fact, and you are engaging in an exercise in futility. Nevertheless, somewhere in the past, I have heard that a legislature in some state tried to get the mathematical term pi changed from 3.1416 to 3.0 because it was too complicated and cumbersome. These demigods could not conceive that they were dealing with a fixed relationship that they could not change and had no authority over. But therein lies the story of mankind since time began.
Okay, so he gets into this idea of fixed relationships. And how do you think that's related? I mean, there's this connection here between the imagination, seeing these fixed relationships, and then recognizing them for what they are. So he's making connections. And this connection, I think, will go into this grocery store example, whole life insurance, that there are fixed relationships in business and that make these connections.
Yeah, I think his analogy in the grocery store kind of gets into the fixed relationship a little bit. But what I really took away from this personally was like picturing a room of 50 boys, right? You got 49 of them all scribbling hard, looking at each other, trying to figure it out, brainstorming with one another. Hey, how are you doing it? Hey, how are you doing it? And I've been in the classroom, right? When a teacher throws out a fun problem like that on the board and it's like, all right, somebody solve this, and like, that's always fun. And I'm a competitive person, so I always want to do it the fastest and figure it out. But for me, like, I was wrong in the way I was approaching it immediately just off first glance. And it's all about, like, I think his point here is that it's just one person, just one, like out of however many can see something just differently and could come up with something entirely, faster, maybe better, whatever. And just the thought of taking a step back and having a different thought process. And again, being imaginative, and to beat the dead horse, saying, rethink your thinking. It starts with a quote from Albert Einstein saying imagination is more important than knowledge. And here's how I approached it. As soon as you say 1 through 100, I'm thinking math, not thinking, is there a different way to, even think about this? And Carl Gauss clearly is one of the world's greatest mathematicians for a reason, because he had a completely different way of even just thinking about it that wasn't mathematical at all.
Yeah, I think there is something to that, because Albert Einstein, we consider him a genius. Obviously, Carl Gauss as well. Both of these men are geniuses because they thought differently, because they used their creative side of their brain. Their imaginations could see things that we couldn't see, or they were willing to explore in areas where the door was just closed, to my mind, in that sense, or to yours. Like, even though the quote is at the top of the page and and the title is imagination, and we're going to be talking about imagination, yet your brain goes to, let me just get the pencil out and start adding up the numbers.
Exactly.
So all of that to say this is an entry to the rest of the book. And the very first sentence I think is important for us to mention here too. The infinite banking concept is an exercise in imagination, reason, logic, and prophecy. None of those things sound like mathematical, financial anything. And yet they're critical to understanding the infinite banking concept. So keep this in the back of your mind. In fact, maybe keep it in the forefront of your mind, because this book is unlike any other, if you're thinking about finance, that you're ever going to read, because Nelson was so imaginative, and he uses that imagination to help us see something out of the ordinary. Essentially, what he's getting at is we have this fixed relationship with this whole life insurance policy, right? That we think we understand, but we're going to look at it differently. And by so doing, be able to use it in a completely different way than we expect. But in order to do that, we're going to have to apply imagination, reason, logic, and prophecy.
Yeah, to his point with the changing pie, it's kind of like, rather than trying to change the rules, it's kind of like learning how to play within them differently. I don't know if that's yes, right, but that's kind of where my mind
goes. It is. I think he says it here. Young Gauss did not invent that fact. He discovered what God had already done, right? So he discovered a fixed relationship that's already there, but he's looking at it differently. He discovered a relationship between numbers that is fixed and nothing can be done to change it. But it's the discovery piece that happened. Last week, I was talking about Nelson's life. And I was talking about his crisis he went through to discover this concept. He didn't discover something new. He discovered something that was fixed and was already there. He just discovered a new way to look at it and to use it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was trying to get at. You said it better. Yep.
So, okay. Well, I think that's probably a good place to stop for today. And next week, we will tackle the grocery store. But we better have our imagination cap on our heads to be ready to go for that.
There you go. I won't preach it, everybody, but since it's New Year's Eve today, I know that my intentionality in 2026 will be to be much better about using my imagination and to have those creative outlets. So I'd encourage everybody else to be intentional about that in 2026 as well.
I agree wholeheartedly. Now, this episode will probably come out in a couple of weeks past
that's fine.
New Year's Eve, but that's about the time everybody forgets their resolution. So let's
be reminded.
A little bit of a reminder. There you go. All right. Thank you so much for listening. And if you are interested in becoming your own banker, don't hesitate to reach out to me at banklessbydesign.com. Y'all have a great week. Thanks for tuning in to the Bankless by Design podcast, where we're done with the system and we're doing money differently. Be sure to subscribe, share this episode with someone who needs it, and visit us at banklessbydesign.com to learn how you can start living bankless by design.